I will start the recording. Okay. Okay, everybody, I think we can get going. It's great to see so many people here. It's obviously a topic of great interest. So let's get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar, this time on the topic of DeepSeek and the challenge to US technological hegemony, organized by Friends of Socialist China and the International Manifesto Group. I'm Radhika Desai. I'm the convener of the International Manifesto Group, a member of the board of Friends of Socialist China, and a moderator of today, and your moderator for today's event. Ever since the Chinese startup DeepSeek launched its R1 large language model on the 20th of January, the world has been abuzz with talk of how it outdoes the best artificial intelligence models that Silicon Valley has produced so far. It gives better performance, it's better on cost, it's better on energy use, and it's more efficient in its usage of data. Inevitably, of course, there has been a lot of carping about this in the West, particularly in the United States. CNN reported that, and I'm quoting, semiconductor researcher SemiAnalysis cast doubt over DeepSeek's claims that it cost only $5.6 million to train. OpenAI told the Financial Times that it found evidence that DeepSeek used the US company's models to train their own competitor. And a pair of US lawmakers has already called for the app to be banned from government devices after security researchers highlighted its potential links to the Chinese government. Of course, we've seen this before, and I believe the Italian government has also enacted some similar restrictions. And now, The Economist reports that researchers at Stanford University and the University of Washington claim that they have gone several orders of magnitude better than DeepSeek's R1. And they have managed to train their own S1 large language model for just $6, as opposed to the $5.6 million used by AI. Of course, this is all carping, and there are many problems with all these statements. But in fact, none of this carping can actually take away from DeepSeek's real advances. It was a really big deal. It wiped out nearly $600 billion of the valuation of Nvidia, the giant maker of advanced computer chips, and nearly $1 trillion of the technology-heavy US stock markets. Silicon Valley had to admit in the end that DeepSeek's R1 model was indeed excellent and that it represented a major advance. But there is more. DeepSeek may have been a big deal, but it is actually not an exception. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute's Critical Technology Tracker, which now charts 64 critical technologies over the 21st century, reported last August that there had been a stunning shift, in its words, in research leadership over the past 2 decades towards the large economies of the Indo-Pacific, led by China's exceptional gains. The US, it says, led in 60 of 64 technologies from 2003 to 2007. But in the most recent 5 years, that is 2019 to 2023, for which it has data, it was leading in only 7. Meanwhile, China, which led in just 3 of the 64 technologies in the earlier period of 2003 to 7, is now the lead country in 57 of 64 technologies in 2019 to 2013. And this already represented an increase over the previous year when it had been leading in 52 technologies. So it went up within a year from 52 to 54. And all of this is happening despite the United States' energetic attempts to try to stem China's technological advance through a variety of means, including closing its markets to Chinese companies, such as happened with Huawei and ZTE, restricting the export of high technology products and components, and many other ways. So really what we are looking at is a situation in which socialist China's stunning technological advances ends up advances upends the core of our received wisdom about the drivers of innovation, because the common wisdom in the study of innovation is that free markets, economies are more innovative, only the private sector is the real innovator, that Western countries have and can be expected to always retain their lead in science and technology, and that capitalism is always better than that at innovation. So what's really going on? This is what our experts who we have gathered here today are here to tell us. We are going to have about 7 of them speak. 2 of them who are in China, and unfortunately it's very late there, have sent us recorded talks, but we will have about 7 speakers speak. And of course, in the interest of time, given just how many of you are here and how much interest this has garnered, I'm going to be very strict with the speakers and ensure that each will speak only for 10 minutes. So we are going to, and I will introduce each speaker in turn, and each will speak for about 10 minutes. And then we hope to have a vigorous question and answer session in which I hope you will all participate. So our first speaker is Alan Freeman, and Alan is an economist and a co-director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group. So Alan, please go ahead.
So I'll share my screen first, just to check, can everybody hear me? You can hear me okay? That's good, okay. I'm going to be sharing just a few slides right at the beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I've got 3 links that you can use to refer the information that I'm going to give you. So I'm just going to pop them into the chat. I'll do that after I'm done. The next thing I'm going to do is give another introduction to myself. Those of you who follow the sort of geek channels, you know, GitHub developers and so on, will see somebody by the name of Ancient Geek. Now that's me. I was present in 1969 when the Unix operating system was first launched, and I was one of a team which actually helped implement that on the Edinburgh multi-access machine. I also had the great pleasure of working in the Edinburgh Machine Intelligence Unit, which simply illustrates that the technologies we're talking about are really quite old. And the question we've got to ask is, why is it at this point, 50 years on, those technologies are now coming to the forefront and having such an impact? So the next thing I'm going to show you is just going to share, if my mouse will work, a couple of, for some reason, yeah, here we go. Couple of slides and then I'll start. This is a graph which I got from Statista of the global market share for desktop operating systems as of February. And the blue line is Windows users. Now, Windows, I will talk about this, has the captive market in desktop applications. It does not have the captive market in server, and it does not have this in mobiles. But you'll see, even in its own captive market, Windows is steadily declining. And although this doesn't show, what's actually happening is Linux, which is the modern version of Unix, is catching up. That's the kind of background to everything I'm going to be talking about. The next slide simply is a paper which I'm going to show you the link to, which tells you how DeepSeek works. Now, there's a very important point about DeepSeek, which is it's not rocket science. You don't have to have a degree in tensor calculus or Heisenberg's wave equation, spend 7 years getting published in Nature in order to understand it. Actually, you can follow it by just unraveling the language a bit, because every technology has its own language. I mean, car drivers have their own language, right? Left hand down a bit is something you have to know what that means. But it's not more difficult than learning what left hand down a bit means. So there is a paper which explains why DeepSeek is working, and it mentions the 3 features of DeepSeek which are central to its advances: chain of thought reasoning, where you get the app to explain how it reached its conclusions and then interrogate its own methods; reinforcement learning, which is methods of actually checking making the app get the right result more often, and distillation, which is one of the crucial advantages, which made it possible to implement DeepSeek on a much smaller capacity machine than was thought to be possible by the sort of Silicon Valley Trump geeks who thought, you know, you have to spend 100 billion to get the hardware. It'll be like Bitcoin before you can get it working. This explains why the team got it working. This third, I think, is incredibly interesting. This is the paper introducing DeepSeek R1. It's not been published yet. You can see it on Khan, and it's a list of the authors. And there are 50 of them. And then at the bottom, it says 100 additional authors not shown. These are not employees of DeepSeek. These are people who have collaboratively worked on an open source project to produce this over many years, and then being acknowledged as the key contributors behind that. If you go to the GitHub site, which I'll also refer you to, of DeepSeek, you'll see, you know, there are 54,000 contributors, which is not huge, but it's a damn sight bigger than the employees that a traditional capitalist can bring to bear by just paying people wages to do stuff, to produce proprietary material. And the final one, which I think is rather interesting, the license by which this machine, the material is distributed, there are two licenses. There's the code license, which, you know, you get to lose. That's just a standard MIT license. You know, you can use it as long as you don't sue us if it damages you. This is the model license. And this is the sort of stuff that I think would make a Trumpite turn in their grave or wake up at night, because it's full of what would be called woke language. It says you're not allowed to use this model to exploit or harm minors, and then it goes on, and you know, you should read, for any use intended to or which has the effect of discriminating against or harming individuals or groups based on social behavior, exploit the vulnerabilities of a specific group of persons based on age, social, physical, or mental characteristics. If you use this model and you violate any of these, you're in breach of the contract, even though it's open source. So the product itself, in a certain sense, embodies its own morality. That's something that I think is an important feature of what is now going on that I'm going to be talking about. Okay, how much longer have I got left, Rodica, after going into all that? Anyway,
5
I'll
minutes.
start. 5 minutes, okay. There's been many talks of this as a moment, as a Sputnik moment or a Linux moment or whatever. It's not, as Radica has pointed out, a Sputnik moment, because when Sputnik was up, the Americans had no space program. Now they already claim to be in the lead. But a guy called Samir Mitra, who is one of the inventors of Java, has just called it a Linux moment. And he's talking about this steady advance of Linux, the operating system, over in comparison with Windows. My objection to that is it's not a moment. Linux has always been around. It never had a moment. It actually appeared in 1991 when Linus Torvalds got so fed up with DOS that he published a new operating system, which was a run anywhere system, so it didn't depend on proprietary hardware, and it was based on Unix, which Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, he of Kernighan and Ritchie for the geeks amongst us, who invented the C language, actually launched in 1969, as I said, when I was there. Why, the real question is, why has it taken so long for the better product to reach the point where it actually is a serious challenge to Windows? And I've only shown you what's happening on the desktops. In operating systems as a whole, the majority of operating systems don't use proprietary products. The server market is 90% dominated by Linux. The Android market is all Linux based, and all the attempts that the US has made to sort of squash that with its intellectual property model and its trade war against China have just caused it to be slightly reinvented to do the same thing. So actually Linux now has more than 50% of the world market on operating systems running on machines. The problem is that it's taken this time because the US has set its sights on crushing the way that Unix and all these products were produced, which is open source. And what I've given you some idea about how open source works is it's just that glance at the number of authors, go to the GitHub site and look, and the way that the morality that's emerging from that. And this approach began in the middle of the unipolar moment when the sort of globalization was in full swing, and there was a sister organization of the World Trade Organization called the World Intellectual Property Organization. And this basically attempted to turn mental products, ideas, into private knowledge. And it basically set out to demonize this piracy, exactly what DeepSeek is doing, and to, incarnate in this, Microsoft's exclusive right to run operating systems and so on. And it's not working. It's ceasing to work, but it's taken a long time. So from the get-go, there was basically a conflict between what I think are two property forms. Just as when agriculture came in, landed property of the aristocratic type first came in contact with capitalism, capitalism actually had to challenge the laws by which the ownership of agriculture and its proceeds were distributed. Now there's a challenge to the laws by which ideas are distributed. Now, Radhik has got a finger up, which
About
suggests
1
I'm
minute
running.
left.
Yeah.
About 1 minute left.
I should manage that. So why is it working now? Because this is a technology which has always been more efficient, produces better stuff, it works better, but has been challenged by this 50-year fight that the US has waged against it. And my answer to this question is very simple, that when you have a new property form, which is what a new technology based on a new property form, open source use of rights of access and use of knowledge and production of knowledge, you have to have a new social system to make that work. One that prioritizes the key factor in the production of this product, which is intellectual mental labor, which is the last thing that the US system prioritizes, is support for creators. The whole model of Chinese technology is precisely on developing its workforce. More than that, it has, and I'll finish on this, a different concept of what intellectual property is for. And you'll see this in Trump's charge that China is stealing what the US produced. Well, DeepSeek is not theft. China produced it. What's happening is the US is trying to stop other people using what is actually more efficient and better. And the reason is the understanding, I'll just finish on this, of intellectual property that the Chinese social system has, which it is for everybody. And their model of use of knowledge is to disseminate, whereas the model of the US is to block. And this is a conflict not just between two technologies, but between two social systems, two visions of the road forward for humanity.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. Almost perfect timing. Our next speaker is Li Jingjing, and as I mentioned, she's one of 2 speakers based in Beijing who have had to send us recorded speeches because it's very late for them. So Li Jingjing is a political commentator and journalist with the China Global Television Network, and Carlos will now show her recorded video.
Hello everybody, my name is Li Jingjing. I'm a journalist from China. I'm truly honored and privileged to be offered this opportunity to speak here. As someone who was born and raised here in China, witnessing these progresses happening around me every day, yet very often I'm still quite shocked by some of the dramatic changes my home country has made. It is just the beginning of 2025, yet we are already witnessing several groundbreaking breakthroughs China has made in technology industry, in cultural industry, military, economy, environmental protection. I can name a few here. As we all know, in the technology industry, during the Chinese New Year, DeepSeek made a great achievement in AI technology with a much lower cost and made it an open source for everyone. It shocked the world and shattered some people's dream fantasy of building a technology monopoly. It's a nightmare for a few, but it's one of the bad things happened to the majority of the people in the world. And during the Spring Festival Gala, for the first time, we saw a group of robots, highly advanced robots, dancing traditional Chinese folk dance with a group of human dancers. They coordinate smoothly, and the robots were able to throw the handkerchiefs and catch them again. It shows the the very precise mechanical arm movements. So all of this show you the potential of how this technology can be used in various fields. And just this week, China made another history in cultural industry, the movie industry, because a China-made animation movie made a historical record in global box office. The movie's name is called Ne Zha 2. It's based on a very well-known story from China's mythology. We all know the story very well. So this movie, Ne Zha 2, is now the world's highest grossing movie of all time in a single market, racking up a staggering $1.4 billion in ticket sales in China since its release on January the 29th. And it also surpassed a previous record held by Star Wars The Force Awakens, which got $936 million in the United States and Canada in 2015. So this movie, Ne Zha 2, totally produced by Chinese team. This blockbuster is also the first non-Hollywood film to break into this all-time global top 20 of highest grossing films. Now the movie has also been released in North America and some other countries as well since February the 14th. So I highly recommend you to go to the cinema and watch it because it's pretty amazing. And the success of this movie, I think, showed several things. First, China's movie industry now can produce movies, blockbusters on par with Hollywood. The scenes, the post-production are quite amazing. And China's movie industry couldn't do this 10 years ago. But now within 10 years, they catch up with Hollywood. Second, some media's reports on the demise of China's consumer market is really over-exaggerated. Because the movie got $1.4 billion in ticket sales in just one market, China, and broke into all-time global top list of highest grossing film, beating some previously well-known Hollywood movies just by selling tickets in China. So it shows the potential of Chinese market and China's consumer market. The movie's story is based on a very well-known story from China's mythology, and the character Ne Zha is a rebellious kid. And his story, we all know it too well. We grew up watching the story being adapted over and over again. So this lead character, Ne Zha, is a rebellious kid who always choose resistance over submission, who always challenge the unjust authority. So I won't review too much of the plot of the movie, but at the end of the movie, his friend and his teammates asked him, "You don't want to change the world, do you?" And Ne Zha replied, "Well, I would like to try." I think this is a perfect reflection of the current world politics. It also shows the spirit of the young people in China. There are also achievements in other fields. For example, in manufacturing sector, China accounts for 28% of global manufacturing output, and that's according to the data of World Bank in 2022. And that surpassed the combined total of the US, Japan, and Germany. And its shipbuilding capacity is 200 times than that of the US. In environmental protection, China leads in wind and solar installations, contributing 40% of the global renewable capacity. Its annual additions exceeds the rest of the world combined. And in military, China has deployed over 200 J-20 fifth-generation stealth fighters, surpassing the US F-2020 Raptor fleet. And the J-20's upgraded engine enhances its combat range and maneuverability. I can continue to name quite a few achievements China has made in different sectors, but I worry I may sound too hubris by showing off all these achievements that my country has made. But what I want to say is, China made all these achievements under sanctions, under isolations, under trade wars. but through the hard work of the generations of Chinese people and their talent, their never stopping spirit, they made those achievements. And it also shows there's alternative path, and China has made a right decision, choosing its own development method, its own system that suits itself. But of course, whether a country is truly a successful economy, whether it has an equal and harmonious society, it's not determined by how many billionaires you have, how many oligarchs you have. It's determined by whether the fruits of development can be shared by the entire population of the country, including those are the least privileged. The biggest change happening in China in the past 30 to 40 years weren't in the industries that I just mentioned. The biggest change in China happened in the villages, in the mountains, in the most remote areas in this country. In the past 30 years, I grew from a malnourished kid to an overnourished adult. In the past 40 years, roads, railways, hospitals, schools have been built even in the most remote villages in this country. If you travel to Xizang Autonomous Region, which is also known as Tibet, you will notice even just this one nomad's house in a random grassland deep in the mountain has been connected with very affordable electricity and water. And if they need medical support, doctors in the nearby county will drive a motorcycle to see them, to take care of them. And in regions where ethnic minorities are the majority, such as the area like Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, Xizang Autonomous Region, Guangxi, Yunnan, you will see kids of these ethnic minority groups enjoy 15 years of compulsory education for free, just to make sure all these kids can have the tools of knowledge to improve their lives, to change their fate. I remember I visited this county in Guizhou. Every farmer or the villagers are streaming the football events in their village, and streaming and selling their agricultural products to everywhere. And everywhere you go in the village, you will see this huge sign saying, mobile phones are our new farm tools, and live streaming is our new farm work. So that shows the modernization of agriculture in the rural regions in China. Now the farmers are using this technology to do a new kind of farm work. We all know that China lifted 800 million people out of extreme poverty. China contributes to 75% of the global poverty reduction by 2020. But the effort to continue to revitalize rural regions has never stopped. This year is the last year of China's 14th five-year plan, a crucial year. And in just a few weeks, in March, we will have our annual 2 sessions, the most important political meeting that sets up China's yearly goals in politics, international policies, economy, in every field. And central government also released a new paper continuing to focus on rural revitalization. Few things is listed, like how to make sure China has its food security, how to make rural regions a beautiful place, how to drive the modernization of rural regions, how to make sure everyone can have a much more dignified life. China is committed in narrowing the wealth gaps between regions, between people, and also between countries. During the G20 summit in Brazil last year, President Xi attended and gave a speech. And during his speech, he said, if China can make it, other developing countries can make it too. And this is what China's battle against poverty says to the world. So, of course, it's definitely so important that we make breakthroughs in technology, such as what DeepSeek has done. and we made breakthroughs in movie industry, culture industry, like Naja 2, the movie. We made breakthroughs in economy, in manufacturing, but it's also so important that we need to make sure leave no one behind. We need to make sure everybody in the society can live a dignified life. In this time, this crucial time, we are facing multiple challenges in the world. It's more important than ever that we join hands to build multipolarity. I hope we can all join hands to build this community with a shared future for all mankind. I'm Li Jingjing. I will be covering the upcoming 2 sessions, bring you the latest on China's economic plans, politics, diplomacy, etc. So do follow my reports on any social networks. And if you have any questions, let me know. Very honored to be given this opportunity to speak. I hope to join you and see you next time.
Thanks very much. That was a really interesting perspective, as always, from Li Jingjing. Our next speaker is Gary Wilson. Gary is an author and an independent scholar and a writer of Men on War and Men in the 21st Century. So, Gary, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. Let's start with the U.S. tech war against China. So some call it the new Cold War. The problem with that is there's no guarantee that it'll stay cold. So there is a major U.S. military buildup around China with a U.S. Army drone warfare Green Beret unit now stationed in Taiwan, and aircraft carriers from the U.S., France, and Japan conducting war games in the South China Sea. Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022, the first high-level U.S. official visit since the 1990s, was a provocation challenging China's sovereignty, and it was backed with an unprecedented escalation in U.S. military activity in the region, which came dangerously close to sparking a hot war. So whatever we call it, a new Cold War, an economic war, a trade war, or a tech war, the U.S. has made China's science and technology a target. The U.S. has imposed strict limits on technology transfers, restricted access to semiconductors, sanctioned Chinese tech companies, blocked academic research and collaboration, and halted many scientific exchange. Now, this didn't just start, it really began in 2011 with Barack Obama's pivot to Asia, which was a Cold War style containment policy. The pivot to Asia was primarily a military operation, but it also introduced export controls on advanced technologies. As a military operation, it involved moving 60% of the US naval forces into the Asia-Pacific region, militarily surrounding China, and expanding military exercises like RIMPAC, the world's largest naval war games. The tech war escalated significantly during Donald Trump's first presidency with trade restrictions and sanctions on Chinese firms, including Huawei and ZTE. With Joe Biden, even more severe restrictions were imposed. The US also expanded military and technology alliances against China, like AUKUS, which some call the Asian NATO, and the US, Japan, South Korea Trilateral Pact. In the first few days of his second term, Trump implemented more aggressive export controls, The media is calling it a tough on China policy. Just 2 days ago, Trump's State Department removed the statement, "We do not support Taiwan independence," from its U.S. Relations with Taiwan webpage. The Financial Times reported this week that Trump has threatened China with 60% tariffs, and he may ban Nvidia semiconductors. Why are semiconductors such a big deal? Well, semiconductors are the foundation of modern technology, enabling the functionality of virtually every device and system we use today. You know, every automobile made since the 1970s has required semiconductors in order to operate. Biden's Commerce Secretary said, and I quote, "The goal is to limit China's access to advanced semiconductors that could fuel breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and sophisticated computers." Well, despite the restrictions, China has been making significant strides in semiconductor technology. Huawei is developing advanced high-powered chips, and the performance of its new Ascend 910C compares to Nvidia's H20, the GPU used to build DeepSeek R1. While DeepSeek was trained on the Nvidia H20, it used the Ascend 910C for inference. That's the process where a trained AI model draws conclusions. Which brings us, of course, to DeepSeek, a large language model, or LLM, built in China that equals the best in the US. It was developed, as you've heard, it was developed using less data and computing power and at a fraction of the cost of US models. With the release of DeepSeek, it profoundly became clear that the US is not winning its tech war against China. Instead of falling behind, China has showed its strength. It's not just DeepSeek. China has built entire high-tech industries that now dominate globally. Huawei is the world's leading 5G telecommunications company. BYD is the world's top electric vehicle maker. CATL leads in advanced battery technology. Tongwei is tops in solar power. DJI is the world's largest commercial drone maker. US restrictions have not stopped China. When the pivot to AI began in 2011, as you've heard, the US led 60 of 64 key technologies. By 2022, China had surpassed the US in 52 of those technologies. For years, AI was dominated by US companies like Google and Microsoft's OpenAI. But today, China is leading in AI development and applications, and not just with DeepSeek. Why is that? Well, unlike the US, which focuses on AI for corporate profits, China seeks AI as a driver of economic transformation, a way to modernize its economy. Lenin famously said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification. Today, you might say high tech. In 2017, China released its next generation artificial intelligence development plan. That plan is based on building open source platforms to coordinate hardware, software, and cloud-based systems. This is similar to how technologies like the Internet's World Wide Web or Linux, which you heard about, the operating system for servers, cloud computing, mobile devices, and supercomputers that's become dominant. They were built on open source standards that allowed for worldwide collaboration and innovation. Accessible, open source AI can overtake the for-profit proprietary tech monopolies. One of DeepSeek AI's most groundbreaking features is its ability to run on low-cost hardware, including laptops, even smartphones, making AI more accessible than ever before. This decentralized approach contrasts with how AI is used in the US, where companies like Amazon and Walmart deploy closed AI systems for worker monitoring, automation, and robotics, while also using it to cut wages and suppress union organizing. The potential benefits of AI, of treating AI as a public utility, are immense. Rather than displacing workers or driving inequality, open access AI can be used for equitable planning of production and distribution. China is already leveraging AI for public
You are at 10
services.
minutes, Gary.
I'm sorry?
So you are at 10 minutes now.
Oh,
So if you would please wrap up.
okay. China is leveraging AI for public services. It's embraced smart cities and so on. Despite the US restrictions, China continues to advance in AI, semiconductors, and other high-tech industries. China is shaping the future of global technology, and AI could play a key role in the economic planning of production and services to meet people's needs.
Are you done, Gary? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you very much. And I should say, I should have said earlier, I didn't introduce you properly, Gary, because in addition to writing the book about Lenin and war, Gary is also not only a longtime socialist agitator, currently working as a co-editor of Struggle-La Lucha. He's also a retired network engineer at the Neurological Institute. And was author of a couple of guides to the Linux operating system. So clearly, Gary has a lot of authority from which to speak about the current subject. So thank you very much for your remarks, Gary. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but we will have you the question and answer session as well. Now, our next speaker is, I'm sorry, I'm using a understand why everybody's saying my voice is cracking up. I have a super duper thing. I'm using a Ethernet cable today. Would you like me to hand over the chair to others, somebody else? I will continue. Our next speaker is KJ No. KJ No is sorry, just one second. Yeah, KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, and peace activist, focusing particularly on China and East Asia issues. So go ahead, KJ.
Can everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to do a short presentation on the age of AI in the age of anti-China warfare. I think this is an important concept to understand. And what I mean by this First, we have to understand what AI is. There have been thinkers who have said that cogitation is but computation. I think that's David Hume. But to understand this, to understand the basics, AI is simply applied math because AI is a branch of computer science, which is simply applied math. We have analog computers and digital computers. If we go back to the origins, we have mechanical integrators. They use gears to calculate the integral calculus. We use the tide calculators, which were critical for the D-Day invasion. And I'll come back to this, the invasion part of this. Soyuz was a mechanical calculator used by the Russians, and it allowed space navigation. The Antikythera was used for the prediction of the movement of astronomical bodies. It is probably the earliest mechanical calculator or computer that we have. And of course, economists may know about the Phillips water machine. This is a water-driven computer that can model the stocks and flows of the economy, especially useful for doing Keynesian economic interventions. So all of this is just analogical modeling. You can think of it, for example, a slide rule is a kind of a computer that uses addition in distance as a way of calculating multiplication. You can do the same thing with electrical circuits. The Ohm's law, voltage equals current times resistance. If you have variable potentiometers, you can calculate math. You can calculate arithmetic using electrical circuits in an analog way. You can even use mason jars or beakers to do division if you wanted to. And of course, there is the old Chinese I Ching, which is a kind of computer. It models stochastic fractal time. But what we're looking at right now are perceptrons, or the development of neural networks, which originally come from perceptrons. They were modeled after a hypothetical idea of the neuron. They were the beginning of neural networks, which formed the basis of modern generative transformers in AI. We also have digital computers, which we can think of as universal Turing machines. Turing machines simply model some aspect of human cognition. You can make a Turing machine out of Lego. You can even make a Turing machine out of chocolate. A Turing machine is simply a mathematical formalism for a digital computer. It's a septuplet, infinite tape, and a state transition rules or state transition diagram. It models everything that is computable using some very simple actions: sequencing, selection, and repetition. Now, it was used, the concepts of these were used for both the bomb computer and the Colossus computer. It was an electromechanical way of code breaking during the war. And once again, I want to come back to this notion that computers were developed for military applications. In fact, they were really considered to be weapons of war. And this goes back to the notion that war is all about engineering. Then the first machines, the lever, the crane, and the pulley, were really machines of war. The circumvallation of Alasia in Gaul was just a massive civil engineering project. The first machines, as I said, were war machines. The first use of the wheel was in a war chariot. The catapult, of course, was a war machine. The helipolis was a war machine. Sambuca, which was one of the first cranes, which created mechanical advantage, was also a war machine. The trebuchet, they used the winch, the pulley, the lever for mechanical advantage to wage war. And the caraballista used the first torsion spring, which is what we use in the mousetrap. It was a form of mobile projection artillery. And of course, Vitruvius, as a Vitruvian man, were war engineers. All of this is to say that war requires mechanical advantage and efficiency. If you were building in a slave society, you did not need mechanical advantage because you had an endless number of slaves that you could work to death. But in war, that efficiency and mechanical advantage became very, very critical. Killing is a kind of labor. If you will, it's a catabolic labor. And war, the waging of war, requires advantage, mechanical advantage. And we also seek mechanical advantage in cognitive labor. So for example, when Alan Turing was developing the computer, the concepts behind the computer, these were immediately applied to the military application of code breaking. What we have, modern neural networks are modeled on the perceptron, which was a model of the retina at the time in the 50s and 60s. It was developed for target identification and acquisition. In other words, it was to accelerate the killing of human beings. It accelerates decision time. And also, from the genesis of AI, from its very, very early beginnings, it was about automated battle management. The concept or the conceit was, how can we automate battle management so that not only can we do it faster, but that we can continue to kill the enemy even after human life has been wiped out. And this was demonstrated in the film by Kubrick called Dr. Strangelove. Now, sometimes people say, does AI think? Does it feel? Can it make ethical decisions? These questions are category mistakes. It's like asking, does a neuron think? Neuron doesn't think, it fires. And so I won't go into this because this is a whole different area, but I just want us to bracket this question and simply understand AI as math. AI can do deductive logic. Computers can do a kind of deductive logic using switches and circuits to model Boolean algebra, and then counting, and then arithmetic, and then computation in general. Neural networks can do pattern recognition, which is say that eventually they can predict patterns, such as predicting the pattern of the next word in a sentence. And this is roughly analogous to a kind of inductive reasoning. But all of this is just math. It's multi-dimensional vector function, matrix algebra, and back propagation. It is simply math. So it's not really a question, is it thinking or not? It's simply doing math. Now, AI is applied in modern warfare, and the US is developing these things to a tremendous extent. It wants decision dominance. It wants to use AI for decision dominance, that is to think faster, to decide faster. It wants predictive analytics. It wants autonomous systems, as we discussed. It wants surveillance. It wants to use AI for wargaming and simulations. It wants to accelerate supply chains. And of course, it wants automated battle management. And we've already seen this demonstrated because Palestine was the first AI-assisted genocide. We saw Lavender, Hapsora, Where's Daddy? These were all AI-enhanced ways of committing genocide. Of course, this has an ignominious precedent with IBM. The IBM Corporation provided punch cards and punch card tabulators for the accelerated killing of humans in the concentration camps. Fire Factory is another AI program that the Israelis have been using. It cuts the assembling of an attack from hours to minutes and prioritizes, assigns targets, schedules attacks, essentially industrial warfare powered by AI. And we know who the key players are. Yes, we know who the key players are. There's Anduril, they do automated battlefield management systems. They want to create an operation system for war. There's Palantir, which wants to do automated warfare. Alex Karp has said, we are at war with China. We're in an AI arms race. The AI race is a winner take all, and mobilization day was yesterday. The J.D. Vance very recently gave an address around AI, and he said, to safeguard America's advantage, the Trump administration will ensure that the most powerful AI systems are built in the US with American design and manufactured chips. This is a kind of a statement or a doctrine of digital unipolar hegemony. It's a digital Wolfowitz doctrine, and it involves block forming and closure of AI technology. They're already working on algorithmic cross-warfare cross-functional teams. And the irony behind this is all of them are lawyers who are planning these things. They don't seem to understand, or in my experience, lawyers are not good mathematicians, although they have the informants among them. DeepSeek is simply better math. It's improved algorithms, mixture of experts, 8-bit numbers, reinforcement learning. Now, I want you to look at these math Olympiads and see if you notice anything. European Olympiad, do you notice anything? This is Australian mathematicians, if you notice anything. And of course, this is the Team USA that won first place in the European Girls Math Olympiad. Look at the last names. This is the DeepSeek research team. If we were to apply our AI pattern recognition qualities, we might notice a pattern here. The thing is, math is a language, and it is absurd to enclose a language. There are no private languages, and enclosure eventually kills. So if we take this and we also feed it back into the understanding that capitalism requires constant growth, and that there is a labor in capitalism. It's the labor is both metabolic, anabolic, and catabolic. War is the catabolic metabolism of capitalism. It's a kind of war against people, against nature, and against the planet. And there's a constant search for efficiency. So you want computational mechanized war. And all of this creates an internet of dangerous things. But the key problem is the role of labor in the age of computational labor. So we're faced with the question of socialism or barbarism. Once again, it's multipolarity or barbarity. And Marx said that real liberation cannot be accomplished without harnessing machines, that we can take repetitive labor, both cognitive and manual, and harness it and have it done by machines. And we create the social brain, the general intellect, which creates the conditions either for concentration of power or the conditions for material freedom. We have to understand that what DeepSeek does is it opens up the intellectual commons and it gives us an outside chance for liberation. So it opens the commons, returns the means of production of knowledge to the people. It gives a kind of digital sovereignty. And from digital sovereignty, that gives us the means to fight digital feudalism and digital hegemony. So we're faced with a stark choice: enclosure or commons, or capitalism or socialism, or multipolarity or barbarity. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, KJ. That was a really brilliant comment, a set of presentations. Sorry, a set of remarks. Can everyone hear me properly? Sort of. Okay, I think that maybe I should hand over the chair to Carlos since people can't hear me properly.
Thanks, Radhika. So yeah, thanks very much, KJ. I wasn't necessarily expecting that volume of physics and maths on a Sunday afternoon, a rainy and wet Sunday afternoon in London, but it was great to have it, very useful, and really helps to inform our overall kind of political and economic discussion. So the next speaker is Michael Roberts. Michael is an economist, one of the leading commentators on global economic issues from a Marxist perspective. His WordPress blog is called The Next Recession and is very much a must-read. And he's written several books, including The Great Recession, A Marxist View, and The Long Depression. Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you, Carlos. Good to be here. The last speaker has been quite phenomenal in what he presented to us in the audience. So I'm not going to be able to compete with that. But what I have done, before I started, was invited to participate, I'd written an article on my blog about DeepSeek as it came out, fairly long article. So I thought I'd do a presentation today, but so I asked DeepSeek to write my presentation for me, which I managed to do, and I'm just going to put that on the chat now. So that's DeepSeek's presentation. I'm not going to share it with you. You can read it there, but I'm just going to go through some of the points that DeepSeek makes on my behalf in relation to what we've seen over the last few weeks with the announcement of DeepSeek's R1 and its other associated AI models. it clearly has been a disruption to the AI landscape without doubt. It may not be a Sputnik moment, or it may not even be a Linux moment, but it's certainly something which has attracted the attention of everybody to the question of artificial intelligence, and also just how that is progressing, in what direction it's going, and how China, at least with DeepSeek, has opened up a breakthrough, it seems to me, in us to look at AI models, comparing them to the existing American ones like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta, which are have dominated the AI scene up to now, with ChatGPT and other models which are available at a price if you want to actually use them effectively. I tried out DeepSeek recently in the last few days. I asked it all sorts of prompts and questions in relation and the opposition to ChatGPT and other models, and I have to say that 9 times out of 10 it was just as good, if not better, than the American proprietary models which are offered to you. And as has been made all clear up to now, this is an open source AI model, freely available for anyone to use and develop. And it's been developed and trained up at a fraction of the cost using older and less advanced GPU chips. It's not using the latest ones, they're not available to China, but it has been able to develop this model at a cost of something like $6 to $10 million, compared to $100 million when it comes to AI, OpenAI, and other products on the American market currently. And given compared to the expense which these American AI companies are going to be developing over the next period, it is a tiny process. Now, Radhika mentioned that Stanford University has come up with an even cheaper AI model based on a similar approach to DeepSeek. All I can say from that is, if that's the case, it's fantastic news that it's increasingly reducing the cost of using these things for the average person. They can play some role in developing and improving the efficiency of the things that they do, and to make them more effective and more qualitatively have a better performance. Certainly, when I'm looking at my DeepSeek presentation, it looks way better than the ones I could produce. And one of the things it mentions is specifically with images is how much is being spent by the competitors on expensive state-of-the-art chips and massive data centers. By the end of this year, I think we'll be hitting $1 trillion worth of expenditure by the Magnificent Seven companies in the direction of AI, which it's a massive amount of money being spent in this area. And yet we now know through DeepSeek and possibly other models that competitive AI models no longer require such exorbitant spending. And more or less, they don't require these huge data centers, which are sucking environmental resources out of the economy. Massive water is required to maintain these systems, these data centers. Huge electricity costs are rising. This is a damaging factor towards the environment, and yet these proprietary models are really no better, no more advanced on the whole compared to a very cheap product like DeepSeek. Open source, allowing transparency and collaboration, and not locked in a black box, but available to people to develop themselves. In a way, I could see it as a sort of analogy between pharmaceuticals, who have all these branded products which they keep under their control through intellectual property for ages, and generic pharmaceuticals, which are incredibly cheap and are freely available, or much more available to the population at large, not just in one country, internationally. In this way, if we can develop AI models which have open source, which are cheap, then it democratizes the whole process of AI development and reduces the dependence on these big American tech giants. No wonder the immediate reaction of the stock market in the US to the news of DeepSeek's development and launch was a dramatic drop in the stock market price for a period of time. The Magnificent Seven lost $750 billion in one day on the announcement. And what investors are worried about, of course, is that huge amount of spending by the Magnificent Seven on infrastructure will not deliver the returns that they expect and will hit profitability. And that will therefore mean that the competition provided by these cheap models will make it impossible for these companies to last. Now, I'm going to come back to the question of why that investment is continuing despite that news and why the stock market has recovered despite that news in a moment. But I think we have to remind ourselves, as other speakers have said already, that this achievement by China has taken place despite huge US sanctions on trade and technology, trying to halt China's progress in AI and chip development, and that companies like Huawei have managed to continue to develop as a competitor now to Nvidia in chips. And it's really down to the fact that we've had a development of these AI models in China based on huge support from the state-led guidance and investment, although DeepSeek is a private company run originally by a financial analyst who developed this. It's been based on open source. It's been, as other speakers have mentioned, a wide range of people involved in it, and it's been supported and developed with the backing of the state itself. And it's worth quoting, I think, Ray Dalio, the American Bridgewater billionaire, that's the biggest hedge fund in the world, who said what DeepSeek demonstrates is that capitalism alone cannot win this battle of AI, this battle of hegemonic control by US imperialism. It's not going to be enough. It needs the state to intervene, says Dalio, the hedge fund biggest hedge fund man in the world. That's an indication of the reaction that he's got to the result of DeepSeek. And I would say that one thing that struck me when Jingjing was speaking is that I disagreed with President Xi. President Xi said that if China can do it, then any country in the world can do it. Well, I don't think so. You need to have a different social structure. You need to have a basis for a planned economy, state-led investment to provide the resources that are aimed at meeting people's needs rather than just meeting the profitability of a few elite companies. And at the moment, there are no countries being prepared to operate on that basis, which is why China has made such huge progress, not only in taking people out of poverty, hundreds of millions over the last 20 or 30 years, but also in extending its manufacturing base and raising the level of productivity and living standards in that country. You only have to compare it with India in 1980, when China was actually at a lower level of productivity and living standards than even India. And now you compare India to China, and that's a startling difference which has been achieved. It's a different way of organizing society which has led to this achievement by China, culminating in this particular DeepSeek. And coming back to the environmental costs, you just have to be staggered at the impact that the Magnificent Seven's huge data center building, which is going across America at the moment, the energy consumption of these AI models. For example, ChatGPT, every time you go on ChatGPT and prompt it, it uses 10 times more energy than just a search on Google or any other search engine. And the training AI models through these more expensive methods, proprietary methods, is 6,000 times the energy of a European city. That's the indication of how much these data centers are consuming in terms of energy. Massive amounts of water necessary for cooling, which has already caused problems in certain areas where these data centers are operating. But nevertheless, the market has not gone down after that initial shock, and the investments are continuing despite the competition. Why is that? Because Sam Altman spelt it out. He's the former head of OpenAI, originally set up to be a non-profit AI development company, but now converted into a for-profit company backed by Microsoft. Sam Altman has said that what we're aiming for is not just nice AI models that anybody can use in improving their productivity, their levels of activity, and their quality of life. What we want to achieve is artificial general intelligence. We want to produce an AI model which is more super intelligent, beyond the level of human intelligence, and that when we do that, this AGI, as they call it, will solve all our problems. It will take over corporations. We won't need any staff at all, and it will enable the big companies to have complete control of their operations using this super intelligent model. A very dangerous thing, not only the question of the loss of jobs, the increased inequality that will inevitably flow from that, but also the existential risks that you will have been in a position where you have machines that are not really in control of humanity at all. As one commentator said, this race is a race towards the edge of a cliff. However, I think we'd have to gladly say that it's extremely unlikely that such a human super intelligent AI model can be built and will ever be built, because really, when it comes down to it, we don't have that machines, as the last speaker pointed out. These AI machines are really just maths. They're not creative human intelligence, which has taken, which goes beyond just the level of mathematics or patterns. It develops new ideas, new approaches, which cannot be achieved by these AI models. DeepSeek's vision for AI is somewhat different from the others. It focuses on social needs, not profits. It empowers small developers and users, and it reduces labor hours and can potentially enhance creativity and the quality of life rather than just the profits of the big companies. So in conclusion, DeepSeek tells me on my presentation that its impact is challenging the dominance of US tech giants. And the key takeaways are AI development can be cost effective and open. Environmental and social costs can be addressed and dealt with. And AI can serve humanity rather than just corporate profits. And actually, what it also shows, as mentioned by Alan earlier on, that the future of AI lies in collaboration, not competition, bringing together people across countries, across organizations, in order to develop these new forms of technology which can enhance the quality of life for the 8 billion humans we have in the world. Those are the potentials of AI. We now enter a battle between the Magnificent Seven, who wants to make money out of this at huge amounts to drastically reduce the creative jobs available to humanity, and at the same time, as the last speaker pointed out, generate and accelerate the possibilities of AI-developed wars and other military activity. And the alternative is collaboration, cooperation, and the development of new technologies which then benefit the humanity as a whole. That's the conflict that is going to develop over the next few years and onwards as we see how the AI industry and its development takes place.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. And this question of the open source nature of DeepSeek, the R1 model, and the fact that it can be freely used and adapted, I think it's got really important connotations at a global level. You know, the fact that it is open source, it can be adapted, it can be trained using minimal resources. It means that it can potentially contribute to digital sovereignty around the world. You know, if you're a country of the global south, you're looking to modernize, you're looking to take advantage of artificial intelligence, the fact that you can use this model and adapt it, you don't have to rely on proprietary technology owned by massive corporations that can then be used as part of a package of kind of leverage for enforcing neo-colonial arrangements, for enforcing unequal trade and so on. It means that digital sovereignty is being developed and asserted, and potentially the US's digital hegemony, which it's put significant efforts towards building up over the last 40 years, is under threat. And I think that's a quite important part of why the West is as worried as it is about DeepSeek. So the next speaker is Ben Norton. I think Ben would be known to most of the people on this call. Ben is an investigative journalist, analyst, and popular broadcaster. He's founder and editor of Geopolitical Economy Report, the YouTube channel of which has nearly 500,000 subscribers. He was living in and reporting from Latin America for several years. He is now based in Beijing. And because it's about 20 past 1 in the morning in Beijing, he's sent in a video which I will now share.
China's rapid technological development, not only in artificial intelligence, but also in other strategic sectors like batteries and nuclear power and renewable energy and new energy vehicles, electric vehicles. This is all very important in several key ways that I'll be talking about today, because it challenges one of the fundamental elements of Western hegemony and of imperialism, which has been based on a global division of labor in which the wealthy, advanced economies in the core of the world system historically have produced the high value added products that they exported to the formerly colonized countries in the periphery of the system that exported primary commodities, raw materials and such, and imported the advanced manufactured goods. China has completely disrupted that system. And AI is actually a great example of this. In the United States, big tech corporations concentrated in Silicon Valley have been spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year on capital expenditure for AI development. And this includes big companies like OpenAI, which is half owned by Microsoft, one of the most powerful corporate monopolies on earth. And this big investment boom in AI has also been driving a huge part of the growth in the stock market in the US, given that these big tech companies known as the Magnificent Seven dominate about 1/3 of the S&P 500 and are very overrepresented in the global stock market index of the MSCI. So China is essentially popping a massive bubble in the equity market, and this company DeepSeek produced an artificial intelligence model, R1, with $6 million, comparing that to the hundreds of billions being spent every year by US big tech companies. And this model was made open source, which is so important because many formerly colonized developing countries were told essentially that they were not going to be able to get access to AI or to develop it themselves. And even the billionaire CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, was asked about this in a press conference, and he encouraged people in India not to try to develop AI themselves because he argued that they would not be able to compete with the massive big tech corporations in Silicon Valley because of obviously they don't have hundreds of billions of dollars to invest. What China has shown is you don't necessarily need hundreds of billions of dollars to flood into capital expenditure to develop this technology. And by making its models open source, DeepSeek is also taking away some of the monopoly power that these Western companies, US companies that is, wanted to use as their business model. The business model in Silicon Valley is to operate at a loss until you can establish a monopoly. And then once you've destroyed all competitors, charge monopoly rents. This is what Uber did. This is what Meta and social media companies in the US did. And this is what OpenAI was hoping to do. But now that there is international competition and it is open source, which is a huge blow to their attempt to extract monopoly rents. And this was in fact once admitted openly by the billionaire oligarch Peter Thiel, who's very far right, and he has funded the campaigns of Donald Trump and the campaigns of other far-right Republicans. In fact, the Vice President J.D. Vance previously worked for Peter Thiel. And back in 2014, Thiel published an article in the Wall Street Journal titled "Competition is for Losers," and he argued that Silicon Valley firms should look to build a monopoly. And he pointed out that most of the successful Silicon Valley companies like Google are monopolies, and they use their market power to become very profitable through the extraction of monopoly rent. This is why I think The Guardian was correct when they referred to DeepSeek as, quote, the biggest threat to Silicon Valley's hegemony, end quote. The biggest threat is actually having competition, because one of the goals of US imperialism has been to destroy all international competition to US monopoly capital. And the stated policy of the United States is to try to stop China from technologically developing. This was admitted openly by the Biden administration's Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo. She said that the US wanted to, quote, slow down China's rate of innovation, end quote. So what happened? The first Trump administration imposed tariffs and sanctions on Chinese tech companies like Huawei, the Biden administration came in and continued those policies, expanding tariffs, especially targeting Chinese industries that have become very important. They're known as the three new industries, which include electric vehicles, solar panels, and batteries, which were all targeted by the Biden administration with tariffs, as well as semiconductors. And of course, this has been referred to as a chip war that the United States is waging, trying to prevent China from getting access to cutting-edge Nvidia chips, which it assumed were needed to develop high-tech AI technology. But we now know that China has been able to get around these restrictions. So what is the response of the Trump administration? Well, it's just doubling down on what Biden did, which is saying, okay, China was able to get around these restrictions, so we need to make the restrictions even tougher. We need to expand the export restrictions not only in China, but on neighboring countries like Singapore. And we need to dub all of this Chinese technology a so-called national security threat in order to justify banning it. So just as anytime there's a Chinese competitor to a US tech monopoly, the US claims, okay, this is a national security threat, we must ban it, like TikTok. That's what they did to TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese parent company ByteDance. And so then ironically, a lot of people in the US moved over to another Chinese app called Xiaohongshu, which ironically means Little Red Book. It's often translated as Red Note. So then the US government said, well, Red Note's also a national security threat, and DeepSeek's a national security threat. Any actual competition to US monopoly capital is a national security threat, and the state must ban that competition to protect US monopolists. And of course, it's no surprise that these big tech corporations fund US politicians from both parties, and Trump invited the CEOs of all these big tech companies to his inauguration, which was the perfect symbol of the US oligarchy and of how the capitalist class is helping to create US government policy on behalf of its own economic interests. I mean, the fact that Elon Musk, the world's richest capitalist, is now effectively the de facto unelected co-president is a clear sign of that. So one of the points that I'm trying to emphasize here is that imperialism tries to reify a global division of labor in which the advanced capitalist countries are at the top of the industrial pyramid and produce high value added commodities, and formerly colonized developing countries in the global south, in the periphery, are trapped in producing low value added commodities and primary commodities which are exported to the core. This was the system identified by the dependency theorists in the mid-20th century. But what happened is toward the end of the 20th century, the creation of new technologies, digital technologies and the internet and such, led to an increase in the mobility of capital. It became much easier for capital to move all around the world. So the imperialist countries in the core, they began to deindustrialize, primarily the United States, along with the UK. And although previously they had been major industrial powers, especially the US after World War II destroyed its industrial competitors, by the neoliberal era, the US began to offshore and to deindustrialize and financialize the economy. And the idea was that other countries in the periphery would simply produce the low value added products for US companies concentrated in the imperial core, and the intellectual property monopolies of those companies, that value, that those mega profits would go to the West, to the United States in particular, because it was in the comparative advantage, as they argued, of the US to become the banker and the financier of the world. And then China, countries like China and countries in the global south, Indonesia, Vietnam, countries in Latin America, would become the workshop of the world. So when the United States normalized relations with China, and when the US allowed China to become part of the World Trade Organization in 2001, the idea was that the US would offshore its low value added labor intensive production, and China would perpetually be trapped at the bottom of the pyramid. That the intellectual property monopolies would be in the US. So US companies like Apple would design the products, and then workers in China would actually manufacture the goods, but the vast majority of the profit would actually go to the intellectual property holders in the core. China did not want to be trapped at the bottom of the pyramid. China wanted to industrialize and produce its own manufactured goods through its own firms and through a state-led industrialization campaign using robust industrial policy and joint ventures and state-owned enterprises and state-owned finance directed through window guidance to very important strategic industries, through the state-owned banks in China, and through state investment in infrastructure, China's socialist market economy model was able to oversee some of the fastest industrial development in history, the fastest industrial development, and China was able to move up the international industrial structure from labor-intensive, low value-added commodities to the high-tech industries we see today. So when the US allowed China to join the WTO, the idea was that China would perpetually make toasters and textiles and toys for the United States. But China didn't want to be subservient. And this is one of the main issues. This is at the root of the US new Cold War being waged against China. It is a war to maintain monopoly capital, which in the neoliberal era has been the way that the US has been able to maintain its economic dominance despite deindustrializing. And if you don't believe me, well, don't just take my word for it. I'm going to conclude this analysis today with an article that was written by the CEO of the US AI company Anthropic, which after OpenAI is probably the most important US AI company. And Anthropic is partially owned by Google and Amazon. They're major investors. And the CEO of Anthropic is named Dario Amodei. And he published an article in January on his website in which he called for Trump to impose even stronger US export controls on China. And he said, the question is whether China will be able to get millions of chips. And he warned, if China can get those chips, we will live in a bipolar world where both the US and China have powerful AI models. However, if the US can restrict China's technological development by blocking its access to semiconductors, to chips, then he wrote, quote, if China can't get millions of chips, we'll at least temporarily live in a unipolar world where only the US and its allies have these models, end quote. And then he added, quote, in this world, the US and its allies might take a commanding and long-lasting lead on the global stage. Well-enforced export controls are the only thing that can prevent China from getting millions of chips and are therefore the most important determinant of whether we end up in a unipolar or bipolar world, end quote. So this is the explicitly stated goal of the US capitalist class, to maintain a global monopoly in a unipolar world to prevent China from challenging US monopoly capital. There is so much more that I could say, but I know that I was supposed to keep this analysis very short today, so I want to thank everyone. I am Ben Norton of Geopolitical Economy Report. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ben. And we're already at 90 minutes into the session. So without any further ado, I will introduce our final speaker, who is Ali Al-Assam. Ali is founder and secretary of the New Social Cooperative. He's a member of the Friends of Socialist China Britain Committee, and he's actually actively working himself on applications of AI directed at producing common goods. Ali, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll share a couple of slides, but before that, just to say that the presentation has been fantastic so far. So all what I could do is reinforce some of the great ideas and perceptions in this presentation. As it was said, is we've been ourselves in our new social scientific cooperative working on AI applications, and what was in front of us until DeepSeek was only OpenAI. And we innovated in a bit. We tried to use a human-assisted reinforcement learning to some success. Also tried to persuade GPT-4 to analyze itself and come up with better answers, and that was very good. But also we understood that GPT-4 and OpenAI and the similar ones from the USA, really, they talk about neoliberal Western narratives, and we can't use it as part of a big project we started called the Iraqi Memory Project. So we went by creating our own memory through using a vector embedding, and so that all the memory is done by sources that come from Iraq and the Middle East. And we've been quite successful in that. But DeepSeek, of course, and things like this give us much better freedom now. So let me share the screen. I hope you could see it. Okay, everybody can see it, can it? Is it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, so really, I would like to talk about what the DeepSeek people call it the aha moment, and the aha moment is when they were training DeepSeek R1 0 on a mathematical equation. DeepSeek suddenly said, "Oh, wait! I can do it differently. I can do this equation differently. Aha!" And really, that was the aha moment for DeepSeek, where reinforced learning, which is the method used by the DeepSeek developer, discovered to be able to unlock new levels of intelligence in artificial systems. As the DeepSeek themselves saying, is paved the way for more autonomous and adaptive models in the future. So really, is this, rather than OpenAI's approach of human-assisted reinforced learning, which is very expensive and takes a lot of resources, DeepSeek went through another system of its own autonomous, with the right incentives, reinforced learning. And the aha moment is when it was proven to be the case, and it was an aha moment for DeepSeek themselves. That's what they said, because they discovered that really they have now the potential for moving into their real goal, which is what is called general OpenAI, general AI, where it is much more intelligent and can do things for itself. And it is what KJ Noah mentioned in his presentation when he talks about open up the intellectual commons. That's the real aim of the DeepSeek developers, who, as he said, and as they say, really they are not going for profit. They are going for creating, for being a research and development, creating this huge knowledge for humanity and for Chinese developers, and that's what they are working on. And there is a tremendous movement in China now by a huge number of AI developers taking advantage of what DeepSeek done, and which is the intention of the DeepSeek people. It is open source, it is transparent, as opposed to being closed source and not transparent, which is what OpenAI is. And that's what's happening. So it is an aha movement for China as well. And probably Xi Jinping and the Communist Party would have said at the same time, aha. And what is their aha really? It's different aha. Is that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party has been developing a system for years that encourage enterprise and innovation in the whole of the Chinese society. So, as an example, from 2000 and 2017, or 2000 until 2017, really, the Chinese government have invested about 900 billion in new technology. About 30% of it was on AI, 900 billion. And then 2023, 2024, I calculated that the Chinese Communist Party probably have invested close to 250 billion into AI developing, going into about 6,000 companies. So rather than having while in the USA, as a comparison, the venture capitalist investment has been about 500 billion, but really most of it is in the top company, what we call it, the clique of seven, who invest in their own, and they go for investment that just benefit the very few top investments. So what you have in China now is before DeepSeek, but certainly after DeepSeek, a huge vibrancy of innovation, not only in AI but in robotics. And the movie by Li Jing of that robotics was an example of it. Robotics and in EV in all kind of technologies that are linked together, and it's part of what I call the fourth industrial revolution, where AI is actually a meta revolution. It's not a revolution, it's a meta revolution that control all the other revolutions. That's what's different now. We are moving into a completely new type of revolution where China has demonstrated that it is leading. So while USA is stalling on different fronts, because of their economic system, because of the way it's constructed, China is expanded, and that's why I call it an aha moment for China, and it is an aha movement for the world as well. Why is that? You know, the USA, when they came up with AI, they thought really, and that goes back a few years, that that they have managed to make a big lead over China. So they said, let's isolate China. So even if everybody knows OpenAI is not available for China, as well as not available for a number of troublesome countries, including Iran and so on. You can't access AI in there. They thought we could isolate China on the AI front, we could isolate it on the chip front, and we could create supremacy, and we could have these super data centers in Texas as elsewhere where everybody goes to there. So the new Mecca for technology, for dominance worldwide is in the US, where USA will retain leadership that is lost for to some extent, and the world has to be just the slaves of the USA. And this is shattered. This is completely shattered by China going for open source technology available to the world, starting with the Global AI Initiative. So really, I call it an aha moment, not only for DeepSeek, but for China and the world. And that's the significance of it. We have talking about a completely new technology. And let's talk about now about what's happening in the USA. You know, I mean, this inauguration of Trump symbolizes really who's in real power in the USA now. I call them, as Yanis Varoufakis called them, the techno-feudals. And actually, a lot of now even you know, deep stream economists in the USA, like what's his name, Darren Acemoglu, who got the Nobel Prize for Economics, are talking about the same thing. They call it differently, but they're talking about the new capitalism, which is techno-feudalism, is these big seven and others who control the data, and we are simply, by using WhatsApp and Facebook and so on, we are actually slaves in that feudal system. And they control it completely, and they control the US policy. And what are the symbols of it? As the question is, are they are the new ruling class in USA? I mean, Yanis argues in his book, is that really this is exactly the same as when you had transformation from feudalism to capitalism in Adam Smith's book, where although you could see the dominant technology is car making and everything, really the controlling class is this one, is the techno-feudals. And the techno-feudal, the problem with them is that, I mean, we have the new regulation that there's no control what they do, no regulation on AI. So AI could be used for bad. And you know, my colleague very nicely mentioned, KJ Noah mentioned how it's been used in the occupied Palestine and Israel. And it's very funny. I mean, I did a very quick research, and these Magnificent Seven, they invest close to 100 billion in Israel, mostly on AI and security. 100 billion. So you would bet that a large part of their investment in AI and so on in Israel would have gone into these killing AI that resulted in the genocide in Gaza. So there is no regulation on AI. They could make as much profit as they can. They could use it for war. They could use it for whatever. And they strive for huge profits. The way taxes are being cut will result in huge profits. So what does it mean? What it means is that with their economic model is actually not distributed. That's the big problem that faces the USA. While the technology is distributed, and the way is gone with DeepSeek and by being available on little devices, by being open by everybody. Technology is really is distributed, but the ownership model in the US, in the West, is actually very vertical. So you have these people; they are all billionaires. They own thousands of millions, and so on, and they control the destiny of all of us. They control the destiny of us who use their system for managing content, and they control the destiny of their people. But so technology is distributed, but the ownership is vertical. And this is a very, very big problem. It will lead to stagnation in the USA, and that's what's happening, while it will lead to vibrancy and innovation in China and hopefully in the rest of the world. And this is really the crisis we are facing now. We are having very advanced technology with AI, level of intelligence that we never had before, where and could be used for bad, but actually there is a limit what they could do, because by being more profitable without real creation. I mean, DeepSeek have reduced the shareholding by $1 trillion US, because all the money they are putting in these data centers and everything, they can't create really the wealth for it unless they exploit more. There's no real foundation for creation because their technology is stagnation. It means only very few can expand on it. This is unsustainable. So we have this problem. So there is a contrast between two words: a socialist system with market driven or with market direction that is vibrant, and that's going to be ever more innovative in China, and we are seeing only the beginning of it, and a stagnant system in the USA. And they thought they won it all by controlling AI. They lost this thing, and that's the real battle and the real world that we live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ali, for that very interesting, very inspiring presentation. And I like this idea of DeepSeek as an aha moment, because as you're aware, and as has been talked about in this session, lots of people are asking, well, is this a Sputnik moment? And I think, arguably it's more significant than a Sputnik moment, in the sense that, Sputnik was obviously a wake-up call for US capitalism, but the US was able to respond to that phenomenon and to compete very effectively. This was at a time when capitalism was still in a period of growth. It hadn't run out of road in terms of its ability to innovate. And meanwhile, the Soviet Union had caught up in a handful of areas, but the US still maintained a significant overall lead in science and technology, essentially throughout the entire period of the Soviet Union's existence. Now the situation is quite different, actually. Capitalism is in a systemic crisis. It does appear to be running out of road in terms of its ability to innovate, and it's in terms of its ability to build productivity. Meanwhile, China's science and technology catch-up is pretty comprehensive. China is on the verge of overtaking the US and becoming the global leader in these areas. And that's going to be a really significant change. I think it probably falls under the category of changes unseen in a century. So thank you again very much, panelists. Those were all really interesting, really thought-provoking contributions. I'm going to quickly ask Mr. Alan Freeman to come in for a couple of minutes to talk about the International Manifesto Group.
Actually, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the aha moment that we just had. And this is the aha moment of people, because we have reached, by different methods, a level of agreement which I find quite astonishing. We're breaching new frontiers. How can you sustain that is the question. And I think the answer is we have to use open source methods to develop an alternative to the mainstream media and the whole controlled way in which narratives are dominated by forces that Ben and others have referred to. And to do that, we have to work together. That's the only way. We have to work out how to deal with disagreements and agreements in a productive way, and therefore we have to support each other. And this has been brought to you jointly by Friends of Socialist China and International Manifesto Group. And how can you support us? Well, one of the important ways is simply the standard like, share, and subscribe. If you do that, you confront the algorithms of YouTube and all the people who disseminate stuff, because they base whether they let other people see what we've been discussing on whether you simply click that like button and click that share button and click that subscribe button. So just do it. That's a minimum thing. But the second thing is we ourselves are an open source project. You can join us. You can support us on both FOSC and International Manifesto. You'll find pages where you can join us, contact us, talk to us, work out how to work with us, give us money, which is not a lot of money. I mean, I heard this competitor to DeepSeek has done stuff on $6. Well, $600 would transform what we could do, because it pays for us to actually produce videos of a quality that will reach people that would not otherwise be reached. So do all those things. I'm going to post a couple of links that will show you how you can find out how to do that. And I think this has been an absolutely fantastic event. I haven't found so many people I've agreed with since I first met my father. So with those remarks, that a cryptic remark, I will leave you and thank Carlos and Radhika in particular for the wonderful work they've done in bringing this together.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Alan. So we're at 10 to the hour. We should try and finish kind of more or less on time. We can go maybe 5 or a maximum of 10 minutes over. So we've got time for a quick round of Q&A with the panelists. If you can raise your hands if you want to ask a question or make a quick contribution, I will ask you to limit your remarks to a minute, like kind of 2 minutes max. And then after 3 or 4 contributions, we'll do a round of the panelists. I can see 2 hands so far. First, Millie, and then Shell. I'll take another couple of hands if I see them. So Millie, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hello, comrades. Nice to see you on this lovely day. I was wondering if KJ could answer a question for me. If he could summarize what he thinks the consequences of using AI for genocide might be for future generations. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Millie. Very disciplined. And go ahead, Shell.
Yeah, my question is also focused at KJ. No, I'm wondering that had he had more time, it sounded like there was more that he wanted to say, and his time allotment was up. So if what particularly pertinent, if he has a bit more time now, would he share with us, please? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shell.
May I ask a question if there's time and if you can hear me?
Yeah, good. Your audio, incidentally, is fantastic now.
Very good. I think your suggestion has worked. But anyway, my question is very simple, and I want if possible, all the panelists to reflect on this a little bit. I'm really trying to find the right balance between this insistence that the idea of generative AI is highly exaggerated. You're never going to get machines that are going to think like humans. And on the other hand, the advances that have been made by China, etc., well, China in particular. So, how do you exactly understand what is this advance that has taken place without giving in to the hype which is churned out by American AI companies in part to justify the vast quantities of money that they want investors to invest in their projects, which claim that they're going to create this thing called generative AI, which is essentially going to replace human thinking and create art and poetry and whatever. So if people could just reflect on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Radhika. And it just very briefly to comment that it puts me in mind of something that a few people have said on the internet. AI is being set up for us so that it will do our writing and drawing while we focus on doing the washing. What we want is for it to do the washing so that we can focus on writing and drawing. We've got one more hand, which I'll take, James Jarvis, for a very short question or contribution, and then I'll ask the panelists to come back in for around 3 minutes each. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, maybe just sort of adding to that, like I work in film and I have some concern about what unions might be doing in preparation to protect our work. I talked with Alan about this a little bit in the chat, but anyway, hopefully that's enough. I don't want to take too much time, but like that's sort of my general concern.
That's great. Thanks very much, James. Okay, we'll go back to the panelists for one quick round. Alan, are you okay to go first?
Yeah. I'm not sure I could say, can you hear me by the way? Yeah. I'm not sure I could say anything that KJ No could not say better, having listened to his presentation. And one of the remarkable things about science is you know when you're onto something, when you agree with somebody you've never really talked to, because it means the same conclusion has been reached by many people. And the conclusion I would put is this, that the fundamental conflict is between what I would call algorithmic methods of imitating the human brain and the human brain itself. The human brain operates on an entirely different, you can call it technical principle, which is neurons connecting with each other, in which events and patterns are represented by the basic patterns of movement of the neurons. And neurons behave in ways that digital technology does not behave in. Now, digital technology is basically a product of the Industrial Revolution. It's based on the repetition of identity. You just do the same thing again and again and again. Can you, by just doing the same thing again and again, and by the way, the art and science connection is amazing because the original punch card machines were based on machines for producing cloth called the jacquard loom. It's an extraordinary thing, and I would comment on everybody who wants to study this to read the early history of Ada Lovelace and all the original people who are working on mechanical principles of doing it. But it's basically that you just do the same thing again and again. You can't imitate what a human does by repetition. And there are two fundamental theorems that prove this. One is called the Turing stopping theorem, and the other is what's called Alonzo Church's theory of the undecidability of the second order predicate calculus. Don't worry, you don't need to know what that means, although it would be fun if you looked it up because it's not that hard. It just shows that there are always problems that cannot be solved by technology, by repetitive technology. Basically, the digital machine will never imitate what a human can do. What does a human do that a machine doesn't do? It creates. That's what AI cannot do. It cannot create. It can distill what has already been done, and it can attempt to imitate what neural networks do so that maybe it can simulate creation. But all the evidence, and I did a lot of work at the Greater London Authority, a lot of work with Nesta, a lot of work with Australians. We pioneered the measurement of the creative industries that you will now see in the British UK Ministry of Culture for measuring creativity. And all the evidence shows that there's a gap in the way that we produce things, and that gap is creativity. And the thing that the machines don't provide is the capacity to create something new. And the employment in creative labor, even within capitalism, never mind in socialist economies, is rising faster than any other source of employment. I've done tons of empirical research, and so have others, that shows this is the main source of new employment. The problem is to facilitate the use of creative labor, which is the primary resource of the new technology, you have to do a total paradigm shift and say, we're not going to invest in machinery. The machinery is there. Of course, you need it. Digital sovereignty requires you have that infrastructure. There's a big discussion about digital infrastructure sovereignty to be had. But the fundamental thing you have to invest in is people. And that's exactly what the US is not doing and what China is doing and what, thankfully, countries, Russia is starting to do. Russia's made a phenomenal transition. In the past of the Soviet Union, one of the things that was very important because of the lack of the cybernetic infrastructure is the phenomenal development of mathematics, of purely mental calculation, which is why, you know, most of the founders of modern economics are actually Soviets. Think about Kuznets, think about Leontiev, think about Lyapunov, think of just go through the people. Slutsky, who invented the Slutsky theory, he was a Soviet, right? Because of the mathematics. So you have to develop the mental capacities, and that's what you have to invest in. If you do that, you don't have to worry about people being thrown out of work by AI, because AI cannot imitate what humans can do.
Thank you very much, Alan. Sorry, it seems criminal to limit you to such a short period of time, because that was quite fascinating. But material reality is material reality. Next up, KJ.
Yes, I will answer the question from the individual. What is the effect of using AI for war? Essentially, if we look at the history of machines, we have to understand that machines are primarily developed for war. As I said, initially, the crane, the pulley, the lever, these were all developed for war. And then they were later transformed into machines of illusion. For example, on the stage, where you used the crane to create the, experience of Deus ex machina, God coming from the machine. And then finally, after centuries, they were turned into productive instruments that could be used potentially to liberate humans from repetitive and difficult labor. So my hope is that we can do that. But without that understanding, what we're going to see is what we've seen throughout the rest of the development of technology, which is to make killing more efficient. The sword is more efficient than a rock. The Gatling gun is more efficient than the gun. The howitzer, the atomic bomb, is more efficient at killing and taking life than conventional weapons. So we can very rapidly see that AI is being used to accelerate the killing of humans, to make the labor, the catabolic labor of killing, accelerated for the ruling imperial class. And so that's the thing that we have to fight against. The last thing I will do is I'll share a little example of some exercises that I did with DeepSeek. And this is to show you that although it is not exactly creative, it gives a semblance of it. So I gave it the classical 6-word sentence. I made one up: cute dress, many cosmopolitans, ugly tattoo. And I told DeepSeek to make a story from this. The story was actually very good. It understood all the context, and there was a fantastic, narrative twist to it. And then I told DeepSeek to write a poem in the style of Erica Jong based on this story. And then that again was very, very plausible. Same thing with the Hemingway story, I told DeepSeek to make a classical Chinese poem. And again, very, very impressive. So I think that we need to kind of disabuse ourselves about the notion that these machines are highly restricted. They have the capacity to do deduction and now inductive reasoning and analogical reasoning. And so they're tremendous capacities, And it's incumbent on us to claim these capacities to liberate ourselves as a class and as humans, rather than everything being used against us and as a way of extracting and accelerating exploitation. Thank you.
Thanks, KJ. Extremely interesting. Gary, I'm going to ask you to come in for 3 or so minutes.
Yes, hi. Well, yeah, the one thing that, we need to remember, we need to look at, I mean, AI is a tool. AI, or a machine. And as a tool, what matters is really the social system that's using it. AI, and under capitalism, AI is a tool for exploitation. And that's how it is used. And, we can't, that's where the problems from AI come from. It's not from AI itself. That's all.
Thanks very much, Gary. Yeah, a very important and kind of basic political and economic point to make from a Marxist point of view, that can sort of get lost sometimes when we're talking about the details of these technologies. So thank you very much for that. Michael, are you able to come in for 3 or so minutes?
Sure. I just wanted to echo the words about the question of whether AI machine intelligence can surpass or replace human intelligence. I think the arguments presented by Alan and others demonstrate that that's not the case. I would add 2 reasons for what the superiority, or the difference at any rate, of human intelligence. First of all, it is dialectical in the way it thinks. It thinks about change, thinks about moving from one situation to another, and the process of change. We're able to think dialectically. Unfortunately, a lot of humans don't, but they should and can do so if they learn this process of dialectical thinking. Machines cannot do that. This is a basis, really, fundamentally, of formal logic. They cannot move. They're given what they have incorporated everything that's before, and that they can speed up and process that in a fantastic way, even writing poems from previous works and creating, as it were, new poems, but they're not really taking forward the level of thinking and understanding of the world and developing it. And the other part of human intelligence is it is social, that it brings people together. Human beings are social animals. They come together. It's the collaboration, the interaction of ideas, which can be achieved through human contact and communication, which again, I don't think machine thinking is going to be able to do. That process doesn't apply, and certainly won't apply in a capitalist form of AI. I finish on this point, Carlos, that the reason that the market of the Magnificent Seven hasn't collapsed despite this disruptive event of DeepSeek in any significant way at the moment. There are many reasons, but one of the big reasons is the belief that these companies claim that they're going to progress towards this super intelligent model, and they're going to outstrip anything that China can do with some simple low-grade DeepSeek, as they like to claim it is, although it's got to be banned, even though it's low-grade and simple, that they think they can achieve super intelligence AI models. It's a holy grail for them. This is the explanation why they must spend $1 trillion on all these data centers. There are 2 things going to happen. This is a fiction. If it's a fiction that, like Holy Grail was a fiction, and this is another fiction, and if it turns out to be a fiction, there's going to be an almighty crash an AI bubble in the stock market that's going to come. And as was pointed out by Mr. Norton, that 30% of the market is concentrated in Magnificent Seven, and a massive amount of the American stock market and these companies dominate the world markets. If we do get a severe downturn and crash in the stock market because it turns out that the returns aren't there, that super intelligence isn't possible, that won't be seen for some time ahead, it'll be claimed otherwise, then we're going to see a dramatic change in the state of the US stock market, and that's going to have a big impact on the US economy. So bear that in mind, everybody, that if super intelligence is a holy grail and a fiction, then it's going to produce a very hard reality for the Magnificent Seven and these rulers that run those companies.
Thanks very much, Michael. Very, very important points. And lastly, I believe Ali. Ali, if you're still there,
Yeah.
can you come in for about 3 minutes?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll speak about two things. One of them is on the question that raised whether AI can be equal to the human brains, and I mean, the DeepSeek people, they say, giving the right incentives, AI can autonomously develop advanced problem-solving strategies. So it can develop things. But I don't think that's the issue, really. Whether I mean, our brain is unique, but our brain, and is fantastic, but is actually very deficient in many ways. We succumb to fear very quickly, and we are succumb to irrationality and war and aggression. And one thing that, for example, AI does is the rationality, because it doesn't have this fear factor. So it can actually complement what we do. So we should not think of AI. I think it's an open question. Although many people, including DeepSeek, they think they could arrive at general artificial intelligence. And we will know that pretty soon. Things are developing very quickly. But that's not the issue. The issue is about what I call it, the human-machine cooperation, collaboration. So in our system, for example, we call it CARE, which we call it Circle AI resource. We think of AIs as people. We give them a personality, we give them a name, and we give them a task to do, and they work with the humans, doing better things than the human things, and not being able to do what the human other things. So it is complementing each other. So for example, we get our cares to summarize discussions, and it can do that much better than humans, because they don't have these egos and so on. They can rationally look at all the facts, and they could come up with fantastic summaries. So the AI can do things that we can do very well. And let's think very much of what I call it, the AI human collaboration. But increasingly, AI can do wonderful things, and we could see it. So I don't think it's an issue. I mean, our brain is unique, and AI are unique in their own ways, exactly like dogs are unique in their own ways, and other animals. And the humans, their problems, they always think too much of themselves, really. And then the question, can they be as good as us? Well, they could be better than us in many ways, because we are deficient in many ways. So we have to think of this collaboration. This is one thing. The other thing is what Alan mentioned in the beginning, is whether we should actually do the thing for ourselves. And as I said before, we are slaves to these techno feudals, because we use their systems, and we continuously use their system. So we have to create our own systems. We have to work together to create our own memory, we call it. And we are trying one project, and I'll be quite happy to share it with others. In Iraq, we call it the Iraqi Memory Project, where we are not dependent on OpenAI, or we are creating our own memory. But we use AI to create the intelligence, but we don't depend it for its narratives. And we are very open to share the fruits of what we do. And we are doing some very good advances, we think. We are very happy. We are progressing better than what we planned, and we can share it. I always talk to my colleagues about let's call our own people's media. We have to create our own people's media, and the technologies like DeepSeek and so on is available to us. So let's use it and create our own media instead of depending continuously on Facebook and YouTube and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. We're at 13 past the hour, so I see there's one or two hands raised, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to take any more contributions. Just remains to give my thanks to the panelists and to the audience, both on Zoom and the YouTube stream. I think we've learned a lot. I think we've developed some important ideas through, as Michael Roberts says, sociality and the dialectical development of our collective understanding. This question of AI is a hugely important topic at the level of economics, politics, technology, culture, and more. I'm sure we'll return to it before too long. Do please sign up to the mailing lists of the International Manifesto Group and Friends of Socialist China if you haven't already done so. We have these webinars at least once a month, and we try to fill what we feel is a desperate need that exists to build an understanding of world politics from a Marxist and anti-imperialist point of view. The websites are socialistchina.org and internationalmanifesto.org. So thanks again, and hope to see you all next time.
Okay, I'm just going to save a couple of things before I turn everything off, but yeah, don't mind me, but people can leave.